Our lives are laid out on a road of bumps, turns, struggles, and more. How do we respond? How do we endure adversity for learning and growth? I'm Aubrey Johnson, and we'll explore these questions and more on the road to rediscovery. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Road to Rediscovery. I'm your host, Aubrey Johnson. The Road to Rediscovery is about reflecting on life lessons to learn and grow from them, and of course, take it to the next level and help others who are struggling through dark times. Now, as you know, on The Road to Rediscovery, we are passionate about giving you quality content that is of value to you and your personal growth. If you like what you hear and you'd like to support, just visit roadtorediscovery.com/donate. That's road, the number 2, rediscovery.com/donate. We may even give you a shout out in a future episode. And as always, there is no obligation. We are truly, truly grateful for your listenership. You know, life can certainly be funny at times. Day by day, we're just going about things, minding our own business, and then bam, we suddenly lose track of our creativity, or perhaps our momentum stalls. And so you ask yourself, what caused these things to happen? And more importantly, how in the world can I bounce back from this, right? Well, my special guest is the founder and CEO of Karenlou Creates, a company that helps business owners scale their business and get out of any slump they may be in and get over their plateau to take them to the next level. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Karen Loftus to the show. Hey, Karen, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you, Aubrey. I really appreciate you having me. Thanks.
Oh, likewise. Absolutely. Thanks. Okay. So, Karen, you were an HR executive at in a past life or career, right?
Yep, I was.
Okay. All right. Well, there was something I wanted to see if you can break down for the listeners. On your website, you make reference to your career as an HR executive, and then you also make reference to quote, as a recovering HR executive. So how do the two differentiate, and if you can break that down for us?
Sure. Well, HR as a specialty has a lot of specialties within the specialty. So I don't think a lot of people get into life saying, I'm going to become an HR professional. I mean, you might, but many of us fall into it. And we fall into it probably because we got into one of the niches within the world of HR, which is exactly what I did. So I started in training and development. I moved into organizational development. And then I managed teams, and then I'm VP of HR, right? Yeah. And every time that happens, once you move away from being a specialist to a generalist, it includes all the other stuff that comes along with HR. And in that world, that includes some things that aren't really quite so fun, Yeah. I mean, it might include labor relations, employee relations. It might include comp and benefits. It might include stuff that isn't necessarily the stuff that makes you get up in the morning and love what you do.
Right.
So in a lot of ways, you do what you do because you're on this fast track and you're doing it and you think it's really great. And then you realize at some point in your life, I really don't have to do that anymore. And so in my case, I stepped back and said, well, what is it I really like to do? And I went back to the consulting, the OD, the organizational development, and the training side, partially probably because that's where I started, but also because I think that's where my skill sets are in developing and creating. And that's what I love to do. And so I'm a recovering HR executive because I don't want to do that anymore. And there's a lot of really wonderful, things that come along with having that exposure because face it, I mean, I'm on the executive team. I'm in the C-suite. I'm in the room. I have a seat at the table. I'm involved. I'm helping build culture. All of that wonderful stuff. But at the end of the day, is it really what you want to do? And in my case, after doing it at a few companies, I said, no, I really don't.
Mm-hmm. I see. I see. So, what were some of the, I guess, virtues or discoveries, or maybe even rediscoveries that you have encountered, or maybe epiphanies that you've encountered in the recovering HR executive phase?
Right. Well, the obvious thing to me is that everything's connected, right?
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
everything is connected and there is a ripple outcome to absolutely everything. So,
Hmm.
you put the pebble in the water and it goes, right? And it
Right.
touches other things. So, whether that was during my life in HR or outside of it, things that I do have impact on other people, on
Yes.
processes,
Yes.
on systems,
Hmm.
on livelihoods,
Hmm.
on goals and desires, things that people might not even know that they're good at or they want to do.
Right.
And a lot of what I do is listen
Hmm.
and ask questions. And what's really cool about the work that I do is I don't have to know the answers because, quite honestly, it's your job as the leader in your company to whom I'm consulting to know your industry, to
Right.
know your company, to know what you do. And so I get to ask the stupid questions. I get to ask the questions, well, how does that work?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
do you mean by that? Well, how
Uh-huh.
does that play out for your team?
Right.
Well, what's happened when you tried to do that,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so that is my learning right there because I'm learning like every role I've had. I have been in a variety of different industries. I didn't know anything about the airline industry. I didn't know anything about the printing newspaper industry. I didn't know anything
Hmm.
about the insurance industry
Hmm.
or nonprofit world or any of those other ones. That's the foreign language I learn when I go to work in a company because I do what I do and I overlay that with learning what does this company do and
Hmm.
how can I bring my skills and abilities to help to the forefront. So because I say everything's connected, I have to realize that if I'm not listening well, I'm going to miss something important. And it
That's right.
could be that they don't even, the person I'm talking to, whoever they are, that they might not even realize the importance of that thing that they're saying. It
Right.
might just be an offhand comment. Well, we tried that before and it didn't work because blah, blah,
Hmm.
blah.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
the blah, blah, blah could be like really important. And so
Right.
that's the opportunity that I get to step back and say, so what I heard you say was,
Hmm.
and kind of repeat that back and
Hmm.
say, so am I right in saying that the implication of that to your organization was, or
Right.
so how did employee engagement increase when you did that? Oh, it didn't. Okay, well, tell me about that, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's being able to ask the really obvious questions and not having any um, responsibility, ownership to having the answer because I don't. That's kind of the beauty of it that I
Hmm.
get to ask the questions, and from there I start connecting dots, and that's where we then together come up with next steps. And we brainstorm and we solve problems, but it's not on me to know. It's on me to ask.
That's got to be a pretty significant weight off your shoulders because it sounds like you have enough of your specialty and what you do in helping your client realize where they are and fully understand where they want to be and then have a plan on how to get there.
Yeah,
So I mean, having to deal with that enough without having to know the industry or how every little piece works
right.
has got to be a great relief for you, so you can
Yeah,
focus on those other
right,
things.
right.
So, you bring up a very good point because I'm starting to think now, when you ask those questions, they are basically helping you to help them. It sounds like, is that
Right. Well,
okay?
because sometimes many times they have not articulated these things even to themselves, right? And
Right.
so it's kind of like looking in the mirror and
Mhm.
saying, wow, I've never seen that before,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
the other thing that kind of goes along with what you're just saying is there's sometimes I don't know, the thought that you've got to use the jargon that is what the world is all about. So what
Uh-huh.
you just said a few minutes ago in my world is we look at the current state. We look at we brainstorm your future state.
Mhm.
We do a gap analysis, right?
Right. Exactly.
Is that what you just said? Yes.
Yes,
But
it
are
is.
those the words you use? No. Do I
No.
have to use those words? No.
No.
I just need to know that that's the framework and that when we talk in a very casual way, that's really what I'm asking. That's the
Yes.
picture I'm trying to paint,
Yes.
but it's their stuff that's what's framing the picture, right?
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And those questions, they sound like they would be open-ended. The
Oh, yes.
questions sound as if they support and encourage introspection, which I think is very helpful to the client to, reflect back on their own business and how they run things when you're trying to fully identify and determine the current state.
Right.
So there has to be a lot of introspective questions, it sounds
Right.
like.
Right. And a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
pausing. A lot of pausing.
A lot of pause. Yeah.
Because really
Uh-huh.
sometimes even when you're being creative and you're
Hmm.
innovating,
Hmm.
it's the thing after the pause that is typically the insightful, great, cool, wonderful thing.
And
And
why
it's
is that?
well, because um, a lot of kind of reasons that could go along with that is one,
Uh-huh.
our brain thinks about the obvious solution, right?
During the
You
pause.
right, but no,
Yeah.
during like the normal conversation.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, you think about the first reason, the second reason, third reason, and then you stop thinking about reasons,
Hmm.
and then we stop.
There's the
you know,
pause. Yeah.
you know, and
Yeah.
it's like, and all of a sudden, there's like another idea.
Hmm.
And that idea usually comes out of left field, or it's connected to a previous thought, or it's a
Right.
jumping off place from another thought, or
Hmm.
they thought, well, that was too silly to mention,
Hmm.
but you're not saying anything. So I guess I will, right? You
Yeah.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
so it's what comes after the obvious that is oftentimes where innovation comes from.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So those principles such as what you just mentioned, okay, and the open-ended questions, the introspective questions that you ask your clients, and
Right.
the full transparency and letting them know, hey, I don't know about your business, so I'm going to be asking these questions, as well as the authenticity of asking those questions. Would you say that those virtues are among those that are foundational to Karenlou Creates?
Yeah, they
Hmm.
are. And it actually is foundational into the name of my company, if I might explain.
Yes, please.
So there are only a few people in the world that call me Karen Lou,
Hmm.
because my name is Karen. Louise is my middle name.
Okay.
My mom and dad and my two sisters are the only people that have ever called me Karen Lou.
Oh, okay.
And so when I was looking at how do I create a business that's truly authentic
Hmm.
and me,
Hmm.
I don't want to be anyone else. I want to be me.
Right, right.
What can I do? What can I call this thing that resonates with me and reminds me every single day to be true to myself?
Yes.
And Karen Lou
Wow.
takes me back,
It just hit me. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it's not about me trying to place some great words into whatever.
Right,
So
right.
you get the Karen Lou, and
Yeah.
the creates is what I do. That's my thing. I
Yeah.
create.
Yeah.
I love
Wow.
creating processes. I love
Mm-hmm.
creating leaders. I love
Mm-hmm.
creating teams. I love
Mm-hmm.
creating my artwork. I
Mm-hmm.
create. And so to me, those two things together
Mm-hmm.
are
Mm-hmm.
the antithesis of what I do. And what better thing to be reminded every single day that that's what I stand for.
I love the context and how you explained the name of your company, Karen. I really, really do. Just like you said, the first part of your company name is it grounds you, and it helps you realize and remember where you come from.
Yep.
There's a heartwarming or heartfelt type of vibe that I picked up from it in that name. It's an
Yeah.
intimate name, um, uh, only shared, amongst your family circle. And then the second part is your passion. It's what you do. It's your specialty.
Yeah.
Putting those two together, I mean, is just a constant reminder of your what I like to call your why, right?
Yep.
What is your why? And I always have to recenter back to my why whenever I have those days of feeling not so much disengaged, but disenchanted.
Hmm.
There's ups
Right.
and
Sure.
downs and so forth.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, speaking of disengagement, I wanted to maybe chat about that a little bit. Um, can you share with the listeners when it comes to, let's say, one disengaged employee, right? I mean, you've mentioned or made the reference or the analogy before about the pebble in the water,
Right.
So,
Right.
um, can you talk about the significance and
Yeah.
tremendous impact that just one disengaged employee can have on a team and a
Right.
company?
Absolutely. Well, let me paint a picture for you first, if I can.
Sure.
So, picture a fence
Hmm.
and picture somebody sitting on the fence.
Hmm.
And you can wobble and you can fall off,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so, if you fall this way, you're engaged. If you fall this way, you're disengaged.
Right. Right.
And there are clearly people that are engaged team members. They
Yes.
love what they do. They're
Yes.
doing what they do well. They feel recognized for it. They feel connected to the organization. All of those things that make an engaged employee. And let me just back up and say, I use the word employee, but I also use that term generically
Sure.
because I recognize in some organizations that could be a full-time or part-time employee. They could be a
Yeah.
contractor. They could
Right.
be that independent contractor. They could be any number of things. But the
Hmm.
team member is the
Hmm.
person I'm talking about, right? So
Yes.
that person, if they are clearly engaged, that's where you want them to be. If they're not engaged, which is what you're talking about, that's problematic. But what
Hmm.
we know is the person that's on the fence could go either way.
I see. I
So
see.
you have that disgruntled, disengaged employee having the ear of the fence sitter. That person's gonna fall off the disengaged way.
Right.
They're not going to go the engaged route. And
No.
that, when you look at the data of where our engaged employees are,
Hmm.
those fence sitters can make a tremendous difference to your organization if they just fell to the engaged side,
Oh, sure.
right?
Yeah.
And
In a good
so,
way. Yeah.
yeah, in a definitely a good way.
Hmm.
So the question I think you asked is, what are some of those like telltale signs? What is it about that disengaged employee?
Yes.
So the converse of what I just said, they don't feel connected.
Right.
They there are some very the Gallup survey, as an example, is a survey of employee engagement, and one of the most obvious questions they ask that people who see the survey for the first time, it's only 12 questions, and one of them is, "Do you have a best friend at work?"
Hmm.
And they go, "That's the silliest question I've ever heard. Why
Right.
is that on my employee engagement survey?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, because the data shows that if you have a close affiliation to someone at work, you are
Hmm.
typically more engaged. You're more connected to the organization. You're more
Yes.
attuned to what's going on, you're
Yes.
happier, all those things. So
Yes.
that disengaged employee is one that may not actually be doing what they like to do. And we know those people, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes that's by choice, but sometimes that's by circumstance also. There's also a piece of disengagement or engagement, depending on which side of the fence you're on,
Right.
that's about recognition of the work you're doing and personal and professional development. So if that leader is not leading that employee to do the things that would provide developmental opportunities and connections to the organization,
Right.
and connecting the dot to how their job is not just a cog in the wheel,
Right.
but
Right.
that they are part of the bigger picture of this organization. All those things that the leader can do to help that employee become engaged. And unfortunately, there are leaders that are disengaged too.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's
now
true.
you got a double whammy kind of going on within your organization, because that disengaged leader is not developing their employees because they themselves aren't engaged, right?
Well, yeah, and if the leader's not engaged, then the disengaged employee is probably thinking, well, what reason do I have to be engaged?
Right.
He
Right.
or she is not engaged.
Right.
And so, and I really appreciate that insight for sure, Karen. And it leads me to ask one kind of follow-up question to the disengagement question.
Sure.
And I think I know the answer, but I don't think I may not. So is being disengaged synonymous with low morale, or can you have one without the other?
I would say generically, yes, that
Okay.
they are the same,
Okay.
because morale comes from kind of a combination of, um, I guess I can't tell you what a definition of
Right.
high morale is, but it's those attributes that you would want to see
Yeah.
in an employee. So you're right on saying your gut. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely right.
Hmm.
Um, what morale looks like for one person might look different than another. And that's why it's such a individual sort of thing, and why that leader is so important, that they need to make sure they're not wearing the boss hat, but they're
Yeah.
wearing the coach hat, because the coach is the one that's going to get in there and talk to them, develop them, ask them the questions, give them new opportunities. The boss is just going to want to make sure they're being productive and getting the job done.
Right. The coach, that's where the support lives, right there,
Right.
within the coach for sure.
Right. Right.
Oh, this is awesome. I mean, the listeners are learning some great insights as far as how teams work and the impact that disengagement can have, and the potential that being engaged can have on the success
Right.
of a team or a company. I want to quickly touch on um, uh, the Great Resignation, and then after that, I'd love to talk about this chief engagement officer that you spoke of before when we had an earlier chat.
Right.
So, regarding the Great Resignation, Karen, I think it's safe to say at this point that the pandemic has caused or helped cause a pretty significant paradigm shift in how we work.
Yes.
Will the Great Resignation do the same? And if so, in what way?
Right. Well, the pandemic certainly was a tipping point of sorts
Hmm.
for the Great Resignation to happen. So certainly companies have gone out of business, have
Right,
downsized, have
right.
pivoted to do something else, have all these other things that they've done,
Yes.
which has either caused that employee to lose their job,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Or the work has changed, or the colleagues that they were working with have left and now left everything that they used to do. And now it's now on my plate too.
Yes.
So now I'm doing multiple things. I'm
Hmm.
not really loving doing their stuff too. They may or may not be working remotely or in a hybrid sort of environment.
Right.
And so their daycare might be affected, their family dynamics have been affected, their kids are
Yes.
in school, and where are they in school? Are they doing
Hmm.
it remotely in a third bedroom? I mean, all these things are kind of coming into play. So
Right.
yes, the Great Resignation has absolutely impacted organizations.
Hmm.
It is one of those things that I honestly don't know that you're ever going to see what was normal again,
Yeah.
right? Because
Hmm.
there are some employers who have just said pretty quickly out of the box, we're not going back to the office,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you're 100% remote. Now, that's pretty cool in a lot of ways. That gives a whole lot of flexibility. So, I mean, there's a whole lot of pluses to it. But there's a new thing that has happened that has hit my radar of recently. And there are some companies who are now trying to pull their employees back into the office, whether it's full time or hybrid or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
And there's a large percentage of employees who do not want to do that.
Hmm.
Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, but why do you suppose that is? Why do you suppose they don't want to go back?
Well, from what I've learned, at least in my personal experience with my company, is uh, these employees during this time of working remotely have discovered some conveniences, savings in gas and commuting and wear and tear on the vehicle. Being able to work and finish a report and then turn around and make a sandwich, or turn around and help a daughter with her homework.
Yep.
Those conveniences where they're just a few steps away between their quote office and
Right.
tending to a family related need.
Right.
I think is that somewhere in the ballpark?
That is absolutely a huge, huge part of it. And
Mm,
now I want to take a step off of that
okay.
because that is absolutely there. And it's a huge,
Yes.
huge, huge portion.
Yes.
But
Mhm.
because some folks are disengaged or not fully engaged,
Mhm.
they're saying, I'm able to get my work done, but I don't really feel valued here. So
Oh.
now they have a second gig.
Okay.
And that second gig can be done whenever.
Mhm.
Sometimes it has parameters to it,
Sure.
but that gig can be done. And it probably should be done from home,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But if
No,
they
that
go
makes
back
sense.
into the workplace, how's that going to work?
Yeah, there's a limitation there.
So,
Yeah.
some employees are saying, I don't want to go back to work
That
because
makes
I
sense.
got this side gig that's
Yeah.
pretty sweet.
Yeah. 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 No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So the question is, what does the leader think about that? Do
Mhm.
about that? Is
Mhm.
it even on their radar? Right.
Right,
Okay.
right. Yeah.
So, I mean, there are a couple of schools of thought here, right? You could take the hard line and say, you are on my payroll from this time to this time. And so I expect you to do blah, blah, blah for
The
me.
hard line, the
Right.
mandate. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Other side is, let's say they're an exempt employee, which
Mhm.
is a professional employee who's paid a salary, not an hourly. Sorry, that was my HR thing coming out.
I'm in
So,
HR. I understand. I know exempt. Yeah.
sorry.
That's
Okay.
okay.
Um, so that person, the other side of the continuum could be they're saying, well, you're an exempt employee. We pay you to do your job. Whenever you do it, you do it. And as
Mhm.
long as you do your job, that's fine.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But then there's a swath in the middle
Mhm.
that is something else. And so, what's the leader going to do about that?
Mhm.
Well, that hard nosed one could write a new policy, but is that really going to change the culture of the organization? Because that
Right.
new policy would tell the culture that employee that this is the culture that I'm in. Do I
Yeah.
really want to be here? Do
Yeah.
I really want to do this?
Right,
Keep
right.
doing this? Or is it somewhere else on the continuum. And so those are some of the decisions the leaders need to make to even understand, well, why does this person think they have a need to do something else? Is it a financial thing? And certainly there is a financial component. I mean, some people, because a spouse lost a job, they're trying to make up income, or now they have to pay for
Sure.
daycare and school, whatever.
Yeah.
But what could the leader be doing about that?
Great question. And I'm thinking that takes us to the CEO that leaders must embrace,
Right.
the Chief
So,
Engagement Officer.
yeah, I mean, we all know the acronym of CEO, right? And
Right.
we know
Yeah,
what
we
it stands for.
Yeah, we
And
do.
I'm just here to say, yeah, okay, but why not rethink of it as
Mhm.
Chief Engagement Officer?
I like that.
Because your company
Love
is
it.
your product and services
That's right.
that are sold, are created, are modeled after your employees.
Yes.
We know, just based on everything we just talked about, that an engaged workforce is, and again, maybe I haven't shared any of these stats with you, but the data on employee engagement, all the drivers, the key performance indicators that a company would want to have are impacted by high employee engagement.
Yes.
So turnover decreases, customer satisfaction increases, sales and revenue increases, safety incidents decrease,
Quality.
pilferage, which is stealing by employees,
Mhm.
decreases,
Yes.
quality improvement. I mean, so all of those metrics that a
Mhm.
company wants to measure, and probably does measure every month or every quarter, every year,
Mhm.
are impacted by higher employee engagement.
Yes.
So why would the leaders of your organization not want an engaged workforce? I mean, productivity. Okay, let's just take productivity.
Yeah.
I read an article today that said that I think it was 53 that an employee, I think it was 53% of employees are productive for 60%, 6 hours a day.
Really? Huh. They have to be
6,
engaged for that type of output, I would imagine.
but
Yeah.
only 6 hours. And only 53%
Mm.
are engaged for 6 hours. So
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So if you have a more productive workforce, you're producing more widgets, you're taking more phone calls, you're doing more stuff, whatever
Yes.
that
Right.
stuff is. And that
Mhm.
stuff sells products or services.
Right.
So wouldn't you want your employees to be more productive? Well, yeah. So in order to do that, one way to do that is to create a more engaged workforce. So, and the thing is, Aubrey, that this all sounds woo-woo, right? It all sounds
Yeah.
kind of loose. It all sounds so,
Yeah.
and for a lot of leaders, this isn't real. This can't be real. It's not about all the
Yeah.
stuff I learned in business econ and stats
Right.
and all my business law classes and whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
But perhaps it's because you didn't have any human relations sort of kind of connection to the work you were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
the focus wasn't on your employees, it was on the numbers. And so, the employees come after the numbers, but I'm saying put the employees above the numbers and the numbers will come up.
The numbers will come. I totally understand. I totally agree. That's the beautiful byproduct, it sounds like.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Man, that is tremendous. So one thing I was wondering as you were explaining this, Karen, is uh, we talked about the change or the shift in how we work now. There's some companies are all physically in a building working, and some companies are on
Yep.
now all remote, and there's a hybrid of some
Right.
some companies are hybrid. So has that had an impact on how you interact and work with businesses? You may have a client that's based on the nature of their work, everyone comes to work. And so when you're
Right.
there, you are working there physically with the
Right.
leaders and
Right.
determining, current situation with their teams and so forth. And then there are some where, you may have a client who operates, say, a hybrid model, you
Right.
know. So does that cause you to pivot in how you help and support your clients
Right.
based on their model that they
Sure.
practice? Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly does. I'm starting an engagement with a new client that I've had the first call, the second call, and now we're trying to figure out where it's really going to go. And we're
Yeah.
starting with the leadership team, which of
Gotcha.
course makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Because the leadership team isn't all on the same page. A lot
Hmm.
of stuff isn't going to work anyhow, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So, and in their case, they are kind of in the what I would call the hospitality industry.
Yes.
Um, and so they have the added challenges that many of the hospitality industries have, and that is hiring frontline workers that are brick and mortar. They're working in a facility, right? You
Right.
can't
Right.
change beds, you can't fix the maintenance, you can't
Right.
do the grounds, you can't do any of that unless you're there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the employees in that organization need to be there, right?
Hmm. That's right.
And so when I'm starting with the leadership team, the first really conversation is again kind of what's working, what's not working, where do you want to be, how does that compare to, and they're part of a parent organization, they're a facility within a parent organization, and
Yes.
so they have some data that they can go back to that compares their facility with their other facilities
Okay.
across the nation.
Yeah.
And so to some degree we actually have some data to look at, although some of the leadership team has changed. And so
Okay.
now it gives the organization the opportunity to look at things with a fresh pair of eyes and say, is this, we know the direction the company organization is going, but is the
Yeah.
way we've been doing it here the way we want to be doing it? So what will happen is that meeting and work with the leadership team will likely happen in a hybrid way. Some of it'll be on site, some of it'll be remote.
Right.
But when it actually gets to, if it does in fact get to working with the local facility,
Hmm.
then I do believe that some of my work will be on site if that's the direction the leadership team thinks, we ought to go.
Right.
But technology is a beautiful thing. I mean, we're not limited to it have to being this. And I mean, it's so funny because when the pandemic started, there were so many managers in that command and control kind of place where they need to
Right.
have eyeballs on you and butts
Yes.
and
Yes.
seats. And then the pandemic hit, and it's like, we can't. We
Right.
just literally can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then the leadership team pivoted and said, okay, well, now we're doing this. We have no choice.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden you realize it's working.
Yes.
Look at this.
Absolutely. That's
It's
what we
working,
discovered. Yeah.
you know? And
Yeah.
so shifting back to something other than that
Yeah.
can be difficult. But that said, there is that camaraderie component
Yes.
of that morale component, the feeling connected component, because I believe there are employees, especially, and I don't want to generalize based on, the generations, but
Sure. Sure.
oftentimes we have seen that the younger employees are changing jobs more frequently
Yes.
than older employees have,
Hmm.
right? I mean,
Hmm.
that's not a surprise to any of us.
Right.
I think that I have seen, and I don't have empirical data to say this, but I think there are plenty of folks that are joining companies and leaving without having ever met their manager or their colleagues.
That is incredible.
Isn't that like, I mean, I say it's a shame. I
It's
mean,
astounding.
it
Yeah.
but really when you think about it, if what what is the option? Are they going to fly the entire team in for a team building session?
Right.
I don't think so. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
But what can they do? They can do monthly, roadmap calls. They can
Sure
do
can.
quarterly recognition.
Mm-hmm.
They can send the people mugs and fill them with candy bars. I mean, who knows? They can do a number of
Oh
things
yeah.
that 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 try to do that try to emulate it. Will it look different? Absolutely.
It will. Yeah.
But at the risk of not doing anything?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, and again, to me, that comes back to creativity, right? To be creative in trying to create and to be innovative in developing new ways to
Right,
virtually connect for those new hires that are working 100, 200, 300 miles away from, say, the headquarters,
right,
and having those virtual team building activities
right,
and being creative about it. So it all comes back
right.
to creativity, like you said.
Right, right. Well, let's think about it not just being a couple of 100 miles apart. Now, the HR recruiter isn't limited to hiring somebody in your town.
That's
The
true.
world is their oyster, right?
That's
So
right.
now you have a manager that's located here,
Hmm.
and that employee is in Australia.
Oh,
Now
sure.
you have a
Yeah.
13-hour time zone
Yes,
difference.
you do.
And all of a sudden, 2 and 3 and 4 o'clock
Yeah.
becomes when all your meetings are,
Hmm. Yep.
because that's their morning tomorrow,
Yep.
right?
That's right.
And so it's just changing. It's just changing.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. It really is for sure. And again, to me, the creativity is almost it's almost the nucleus when it comes to, how it changes. How can we sustain the change or sustain, say, our business
Hmm.
in the midst of the change, right?
Right, right,
That's very important
right,
to consider, as I'm sure the business leaders are, as I'm sure you are bringing to light for the
right,
business leaders.
right.
Yeah,
And
Karen. Okay, go ahead.
oh no, I was just going to say that
Yeah.
whole concept of creativity and agile approach to
Yes.
change
Yes.
is so important, because while I gotta admit, I don't like putting out schlocky product. I
Right.
believe in my heart that it needs to look great. It needs
Yeah.
to be great. It
Hmm.
needs to, because that represents me. But there's a fine line between getting it done and getting it done with perfection,
Yes.
because that agile approach to let's incrementally change and check it out and
Yeah.
see how it's going
Hmm.
is a great thing. And in our remote environment, um, we can do that. We can
Yes.
do that so easily, and we can
Yes.
get feedback along the way. So why why not?
No, agreed.
Yep,
100%.
yep.
Agreed. So Karen, how can the listeners connect with you and learn more about the great services that you're extending to small business owners?
Sure, absolutely. Well, aside from my obvious LinkedIn profile, which I got the name Karen Loftus, so there you go. LinkedIn,
Yeah.
that's me. But the other option, obviously, is my website, karenloucreates.com. And
Okay.
I have a section on there that is a bunch of freebies,
Hmm.
because, again, I feel like giving it away is, you know, lets people try out things, whether they're
Sure.
infographics or quick
Hmm.
videos
Hmm.
or PDFs of tools that I use or whatever.
Yeah.
So certainly feel free to go to my website, karenloucreates.com.
Okay.
And with that, you can see about some of the coaching opportunities I provide and
Okay.
just learn a little bit more about me.
Fantastic. We are going to definitely make sure that we put direct links to
Okay.
connecting with you on LinkedIn,
Okay.
as well as your website, to see all the freebies that you have to offer, to get people at least on the track of thinking about, if they're currently in a rut or at a plateau, thinking about how to get out of that, or what are some of the causes for getting into that, or maybe they want to be proactive and have these tools available, or at least the information on how to, how to get out of that. ahead of time,
Right.
thinking that inevitable time will come when they reach the
Right.
plateau. How will they
Right.
respond? Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
that solopreneur entrepreneur
Yes.
is a perfect person for that thought
Hmm.
because they know that growth is coming.
Yes.
And they know, after you hire a VA, you're going to start hiring. You're going to
Hmm.
start hiring.
Hmm.
And most entrepreneurs start a business because they love the thing that they do, that they
Yeah.
created,
Right.
but they don't have a need to be a leader. They just need to be able to sell their thing. Well,
Yeah.
now all of a sudden it's a business
Hmm.
and they need to start growing a team. And now, oh my goodness, I have to
Yes.
lead people. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's an amazing opportunity to have light bulbs go off for people.
Yeah. No, it can certainly snowball for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Karen Loftus, everyone. Karen, thank you so, so very much for coming on the show. Really, really appreciate the insights. I know what you shared has definitely resonated with the listeners in terms of just identifying, when they're in a rut or when they are at a plateau, and the importance of being engaged, right?
Yeah.
As well as the implications when someone is not engaged. So thanks again for coming on the show for sure,
Thank you.
Karen.
Thank you so much, Aubrey. Appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. And I want to thank all of you for coming on to tuning in and listening to the show. And if you have a loved one or a friend or a colleague who has reached their plateau and not quite sure how to regain their momentum, not quite sure how to turn things around and rediscover their creativity, I humbly ask that you please share this show with them, because on the road to rediscovery, we want our listeners to know two things. Number one, you're not alone. And number two, there's always hope. The road to rediscovery, it's a movement, a revolution. And guess what? You are now part of it. We're all roadies on this journey of life, and it sure feels good having you on the road with me. Thanks again for listening. We'll chat again soon. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of The Road to Rediscovery. We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email at roadtorediscoverypodcast@gmail.com and leave us any questions or comments you may have. The Road to Rediscovery is an AJ Shark production.